Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the House Committee on Small Business. I apologize for the technical difficulties that we just experienced for the last 15 minutes, but we're on. So thank you for hanging in there. Anyway, it's Monday, May 10th, 2021, and it is 3:15, and Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chairwoman McEntee.
Here.
First Vice Chair Costantino. Second Vice Chair Cortvriend.
Here.
Representative Caldwell.
Justine, can you hear us?
Sorry, present.
Great.
Representative Carson. Representative Casimiro. Representative Kassar.
Here.
Representative Diaz.
Here.
Representative Fenton-Fung. Representative Giraldo.
Here.
Representative Perez. Representative Phillips.
Present.
Representative Price. Representative Ranglin-Vassell.
Present.
Representative Slater.
Present.
Madam Chairwoman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we have one bill scheduled for consideration tonight. This is House Bills number 6119, sponsored by myself and co-sponsored by Reps. Constantino, Caldwell, Cortvriend, Phillips, Carson, Kassar, Giraldo, Casimira, and Slater. So I'm proud to say it's most of my committee. So thank you very much for the co-sponsors. The act is entitled An Act Relating to Towns and Cities, Small Businesses, and it relates to zoning ordinances. It imposes a one-year moratorium on enforcement of municipal ordinance or zoning requirements that penalize owners of food service establishments / bars for modification / alterations to their premises in response to an emergency declaration. And I believe we have a substitute A. And the substitute A reads, and I know you all have it there. Basically what it does is it reduces the moratorium to 6 months from the date that the emergency order is lifted, and it will be rescinded 6 months thereafter or until January 1, 2022, whichever occurs first. All of the other language that suggested a modification of any kind of zoning ordinances in the future has been removed. So do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the sub-A language of 6119.
And permanent postponement of the underlying legislation of 6119.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
So all in favor, we need a roll call.
Chairwoman McEntee.
Aye.
First Vice Chair Costantino. Second Vice Chair Cortvriend.
Aye.
Representative Caldwell.
I'm going to say aye, but also I don't know if any of you have your mics on. It's very, the volume is very low on our end.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Thank you. Aye.
Representative Carson. Representative Casimiro. Representative Kassar.
Aye.
Representative Diaz.
Aye.
Representative Fenton-Fung.
Aye.
Representative Giraldo.
Yes.
Representative Perez. Representative Phillips.
Aye.
Representative Price. Representative Ranglin-Vassell.
Marcia.
On mute.
Marcia, can you turn you're on mute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Representative Ranglin-Vassell.
Yes.
Representative Slater.
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Thank you very much. Now we have an agenda with a couple of very prominent guests here today. And first on our agenda is Lisa Ranglin. She is the founder and president of the Rhode Island Black Business Association. Lisa, I see you on the Zoom. Welcome, and you
Thank
have the
you so
floor.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I am so delighted to be here, and to all of you that's on the committee, and special shout out to my sister, Marcia Ranglin-Vassell. I'm so excited to be here today to present the state of Black businesses in Rhode Island. I thank you all for the opportunity to present. I am serving today in the capacity of founding president for the Rhode Island Black Business Association, as well as serving as the executive director. We're in a really exciting time right now with the Rhode Island Black Business Association, and we go by RIBBA. So we just celebrated our 10th year in March, and I know you are not able to see me, but to be mindful of time, I'm just going to go through the presentation, if that's okay.
That'd be great, Lisa. Thank you.
Hello, I'd like to be acknowledged as being present on the meeting, please.
So ordered. Thanks for coming.
As I noted, my name is Lisa Ranglin. I'm currently the founding president of the Rhode Island Black Business Association, and we go by RIBBA. Today, I have the opportunity to share with you around the state of Black businesses here in the state, as well as the impact. We'll talk through some historical legislation that's out there on the books today. We'll also look at the benefits that can be derived from greater investment within Black and Brown business community, and then we'll share recommendations.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have I have another meeting to go to, so I'll have to bow out on this.
Bye, Justin.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. Proceed,
That's okay.
Lisa. Please.
That's all right.
The Rhode Island Black Business Association, RIBBA, we're a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing Black-owned and minority businesses here in Rhode Island through access to capital,
Still there.
resources, training, business advocacy, and of course, the work that we do with businesses impact workforce development as well. A little bit about the organization, moving on to the next slide, Rep, thank you. We focused on 3 major categories from the work that we do. We focus on business development. Again, the goal is to impact Black businesses and minority businesses to ensure that they're actually growing and scaling and creating needed jobs. In addition to our business development resources, we also provide technical assistance such as direct support for small businesses, such as marketing, legal services, accounting services, and so forth. And more importantly, we help them to gain access to capital as well as contract opportunities. And then again, the organization was founded 10 years ago, primarily to ensure that we're advocating for greater investment for Black businesses, as well as businesses in general and small businesses in general, but also around ensuring that we have policies in place that really move the dial in a favorable way for businesses. We know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy, so it makes perfect sense for a greater investment within these businesses. Rep, could you go to the next slide? So here I'll share with you the state of Black businesses in Rhode Island and also the impact, but we'll look at what the census data tells us. Currently, the Black businesses in general in the nation comprise of 12.2%. That's the U.S. population. Black businesses, however, comprise of about 2.2%, and that's nationwide. 5.7% of that 2.2 million is really only those businesses with employees. The next data point that I would like to call out to you as it relates specifically to Rhode Island is that here in Rhode Island, based on the last census data, we have 3,364 Black-owned businesses. Remember that number, 3,364. But only 295 of those businesses or firms that are able to hire at least one employee. Think about that. 3,364 with only 295 with employees. So as you can think about that, what does that impact? We talked about earlier that small business is the backbone of the economy. They create jobs, they hire people right within their community. So the fact that we have so few Black businesses that are actually at scale and can be able to create jobs, hence we have seen this very high unemployment rate here within Rhode Island, specifically within the Black community. From the data point, we can say that unemployment of white individuals, when somebody in the white race are out of work, they actually receive 24% more benefits than a Black person that only receive 13%. So let those numbers sink in for a moment. So again, these are people that are working in, again, in most cases, lower tier jobs. I would applaud the group for passing the $15 minimum wage because it ties back right here. When folks are working, they actually able to create jobs, but they also are able to make $15, which is great. So I'm glad that you all did that. So congrats there. Black businesses lack equity across the board as it relates to contract opportunities, as it relates to loans. They are not getting their fair share. So we got to fix that. Across the state here in Rhode Island, Black businesses are basically shut out of opportunities, specifically as it relates to contracts. So there's a law on the books today that indicates, Rep, do you mind moving to the next slide, please? Here in Rhode Island, 41%, and this is also across the nation, 41% of Black businesses have closed their doors forever. 41% closed their doors forever. That's a direct impact. We're all talking right now, all of us are talking about equity, inclusion, and diversity. When we think about the unemployment rate here in the state, when we think of the lack of investment within Black and brown community, hence what we're seeing, right? 44% of Black-owned businesses, they were able to use their own funding, the little funding that they have to start their businesses. They're not getting support, right? Only 33% of Black Rhode Islanders are home ownership. So if you think about the unemployment rate, when you think about the lack of investment in Black businesses, you could see why the home ownership rate is so low here in the state. The other data point that should call our attention to, or we should all be mindful of, Rhode Island ranked, I think this is a number of years, not just this year or last year, we've been seeing the same third ranking here, the third worst state for Black businesses, comparing to all the other states, right? We're number 48, Rhode Island. That is nothing for us to write home about, for nothing for us to be proud about, right? Black businesses create jobs when they are thriving, they hire people within their community, it has a direct impact. So we are all alarmed about COVID-19, what has happened with COVID-19 disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities. Well, we know why. From these data points that we're looking at here, we could see why, because Black businesses are not at scale, they're unable to create, jobs in a robust way to really hire lots of people. Rep, could you advance to the next slides? Here on the screen, what you're seeing is some legislation that are actually on the books today. One of them that I would love to call your attention to is item number 2, minority business enterprise. This law has been on the books since 1986. And this one speaks specifically to access 10% set aside for minorities, minority-owned businesses, as well as women-owned businesses. I can tell you, since 1986, The state has never, ever complied with its own law of 10% set aside to be allocated of procurement dollars to minorities, Black, or other minorities. As you guys, as you think about this from a legislative perspective, this is a data point. It's on the books today. It's not compliant. Can you imagine if Black and brown businesses were able to take advantage of this? So this is a law that's on the books. It's never been enforced. It has absolutely no teeth. No one enforces it. So this is something that I would urge the legislative body to look at. And then there are several other legislation here that I've cited. These were intended to really help and stimulate the economy from an urban economic development perspective. The data points are clear. It's not working. It has never worked, and we need to fix this. So I will challenge the leadership that's on this call today and others that's out there, whether in the Senate or in other places, to think about how can we really work intentionally to ensure that when we do implement a law or a law is passed, that it's actually meaningful and it actually works. Thank you. Move on to the next slide. So here are some recommendations, and I know that our Treasurer magazine had presented a few weeks ago to you, and some of the things that he presented, we had actually discussed them. And I was delighted to hear that some of them actually became bills that I think are in progress today. I'm not sure of the status of them, but I can tell you that access to capital is huge. It's a big deal for Black and minority businesses today, and it's always been. I can tell you, and I'm sure some of you on this call will probably can attest, again, access to capital is one of the things that we hear everybody talks about, right? People, Black and brown businesses, they don't have relationship with banks. Well, why is that, right? So Black and brown businesses are less likely to receive funding from credit unions or banks. Most recently, with the relief fund that came from the national, the governor, the last governor, Governor Raimondo, allocated $50 million for small business lending. And out of that $50 million, only 20% went to Black and Latino. 50 million and only 26%, that's the number that they reported, right? The other data points that I would love to call your attention to is to ensure that these relief funds that are coming into the state, that they're actually going to Black and brown and small businesses in an equitable way. We know that we've seen that Black and brown businesses, especially Black businesses, continue to be left behind, shut out of opportunities. What we're knowing and what we've seen, 400 plus years of slavery has contributed to the adverse impact of what we're seeing with relief funds coming into the state but missing the Black community. Again, we got to ensure that we invest heavily and robustly in minority-led organizations that are working intentionally to really move the dial in a meaningful way as it relates to Black businesses and minorities and other small businesses as well. Rob, could you advance the slide? Thank you. So as I noted, again, the increased utilization, what we're seeing when we talk about utilization, we're talking about procurement target, right? So procurement opportunities, money that the state is spending today. I can share with you that our neighboring states, Connecticut, they're at 25%. Rhode Island, we're only at 10% and we can't make that number work. We have never complied with a law since 1986, and we're only at 10%. Our neighboring state, Connecticut, 25%, and they're nailing their numbers. When we look at Massachusetts and Boston, their target is 25%. Some cases they're exceeding that 25%. Rhode Islanders, I will challenge the leaders that is on this call to think about how can we not just, target 10%, but I will challenge us to increase that number to consider 25%, but also make sure that it's working. Don't just put a number or a target out there and then don't reach it, right? We want to ensure that we're doing the things that are really necessary for us to achieve that goal that we've set. And we know when Black businesses or other minority businesses are gaining access to loans and contract, the good news is they hire directly within their communities, right? So it's a win-win across the board. So I will ask for greater investment in Black-led organization widely, specifically in organization that are supporting Black business development or minority business development. It is very important. We cannot reopen the state in a meaningful way and have everyone thrive without great investment. What we're talking about, we hear about this nationally, the K-shaped recovery. So when we think of the K-shaped recovery, what are we talking about? It really speaks to a part of the state will advance and go back to what we consider normal, the new normal, and then we'll continue to leave the Black and brown community behind. So as leaders here in the state, I encourage you guys to think about how you can ensure that all part of the community, not just some part or some people within Rhode Island thrive, but also broadly, all of us. So I want to pause there and to share with you, I'll take question, but I want to share with you some benefits. When we think about return on investment, you know, what's that return on investment when businesses are thriving? I mentioned earlier, job creation, right? Wealth generation. We have a direct benefit to home ownership. We know that home ownership is one of the best wealth creator, right? It's an asset that passed down from generation to generation. Within the Black community, only 33% of Black Rhode Islanders own their own home. 67% of Black Rhode Islanders are renters. So think about that. They're not able to pass on that asset to the next generation. We got to fix that. We also know when we return and we invest boldly in Black business development, it impacts education, it impacts our kids, right? When mom and dad or whomever in the home, they're working and they're able to provide for their children, you have a direct increase in education outcome, health outcome. We will reduce food insecurity and also housing insecurity. So those are the key points that I would like to share with you today. And I'll pause there and see if there is any questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your very interesting and educational presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Any members of the committee? Representative Fenton-Fung.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Lisa, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all this work and everything you do, helping out, especially in the urban core. I do have a question for you. When we were talking, and during the presentation, you were talking about how difficult it was to get those relief funds to the minority business community. When you were, especially in the Asian American ones, I remember I had to help a couple of Vietnamese family businesses access it. They didn't quite understand how to go. Sometimes there were language barriers. What were the big barriers that you found when we were trying to get these businesses hooked up with these programs? Was it a lack of awareness they were there, afraid of the process, language barriers? What did you find as the major issues here?
So great question. That's an excellent question. So the first round where the governor allocated $50 million, the biggest challenge there initially was the request for a DUNS number. So when we're talking about micro businesses or very small, and micro businesses are defined by businesses with 9 or less employees, or we're talking about very small companies. So some of the challenges that we saw initially was around having a DUNS number available for the application. In order for you to submit your application, you needed to have a DUNS number. The other thing that we saw from a challenge perspective were around items such as not readily having financial statement available. Yes, we did have some challenges. I know not so much within our organization or our members or the businesses that we support, but in conversation with other partners out there, such as the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or other organization, we heard that there were some language challenges. However, when we think about the minority or the micro business population, the biggest challenge that we've seen and heard from our constituents or the clients that we serve is specifically around The level of the application was just way over the top in terms of, we're talking about a grant, so you're not doing any risk rating, and the application was very similar to if you were going into a bank applying for a loan, right? Like they were risk rating it, and they were worried about, the loss if they gave this fund to somebody else. Keep in mind, the funds were grants, so they weren't required to be paid back. The second tier that we saw as it relates to PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, that specifically had a challenge as it relates to the lack of relationships. So some of these businesses that we're talking about, they are not banking with banks or credit unions. So as you probably heard early on, if you did not have a relationship with these credit unions or any financial institution, you were basically shut out, right? So what needs to happen is that greater investment needed to make sure that businesses are able to thrive and access. The other thing is a lack of relationship, right? So we as an organization were able to partner and identify businesses and work directly with them. Companies were not going to Commerce RI. They were just not going, right? So hence we need organizations like the Rhode Island Black Business Association, Urban Ventures, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. These are organizations that are on the ground today that have relationship with small businesses, right? And they can connect and they can break down barriers for them. But organization like ours really needs to be at scale. But great question.
Yeah, it sounds like just the disconnect of everybody kind of working on their own for so long, but when a grant program comes up like this, I mean, I had businesses saying like, it's not worth all that effort for 5,000. It was that, plus they were a little nervous. They didn't want to screw something up and then perhaps put themselves in jeopardy for something else. So I definitely think there's a lot of opportunities to work at scale, as you say, especially in the urban core. In the next 3 or 4 years, what would happen if a similar situation happened in 5 years? What do we need to upskill? And I think organizations like yours are so important, but I also think it's about time we start talking to some of these business banks, especially when you're talking about access to capital and building those relationships. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the small community banks here in Rhode Island to make some inroads and see what kind of bridges we can build over the next few years. So I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I could note, I think it would be great for these banks to step up. I can tell you the last president actually took away the actually requirement as it relates to Community Reinvestment Act. So Community Reinvestment Act pretty much talks about banks and credit union needs to provide products and services to all of the constituents where they do business, not just some. But the last president took that away, so it was not mandated. I'm not sure what the current president will do. I hope he actually puts that back into operation. So banks and credit unions really need to do a better job in terms of engaging smaller firms and organizations to build relationship and to ensure that they're actually providing services to all members, not just to some, and to all people within the area that they serve. And I'll challenge the leaders on this call and the other leaders out there to think about, what legislation can be put forward in order to ensure that banks and credit union are actually stepping up. The other big thing that we see when in some of these urban cores, we don't have enough banks or credit unions. So people just don't have access, right? That's a challenge. And we got to fix that. But it requires really political will and leadership to step up and really demand. I think we need to be bold in our actions, and too often what happens, the minority community continues to be pushed further down into poverty because of the lack of robust investment, and that needs to change.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Lisa. As a matter of fact, I am very familiar with the Community Reinvestment Act that the banks were required to do. My daughter used to work for Citizens Bank in Boston, and that's exactly what she was doing. But I would say we could do some legislation that might enhance that in Rhode Island, because that was a great program.
It really was.
And I see some of the other points you brought up is budget-friendly tax relief. I believe there is a bill in currently, the penalty-free tax deadline extensions, I think Representative Constantino may have that bill, and I don't think it's been heard in finance yet. But there is a bill, the penalty-free tax audits, it's already been heard. That was the Treasurer Magaziner had discussed that with us. I don't know where that is currently, but it's certainly worth checking up on. And I also know that Representative Cortvriend, who's in here today with us, has a bill that you might want to talk about, Terry, regarding
The unemployment piece, that's a big
for
one.
businesses that
Yeah.
have, that are no longer in business. So if you want to say anything about that, Terry, that'd be great.
Well, we just put that in last week. It was heard before Finance to enact the self-employment assistance program. So that would help people that are wanting to start businesses that are currently unemployed. And I'd be happy to talk with you about that more. I know the treasurer wants to do some fine tuning on the language the way it's written right now, but I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that bill.
Yeah, that's actually a great bill, Rep. I mean, I know for a fact that we've looked at models across the country. I did talk to the treasurer a few months ago when he came and asked him, what can we do to really move the dial? I think you're absolutely right. We're seeing there's a high unemployment rate or in the state. People are looking to start businesses. People are looking to scale businesses. And if their unemployment is cut off from under them, then they're just not able to really move ahead with their company. So I think having that support, having that safety net in place where it's either extended for 6 months or whatever that time frame is, I think it makes sense. I think there's a lot of states across the nation that are doing that. And I think we should look to support that, again, with this high unemployment rate, specifically within Black and brown communities and other communities as well. I think it's a good bill, and I think it would be really great for Rhode Island and Rhode Islanders.
Thank you. Could you?
You're welcome.
We had a little technical difficulty, and when you, at the beginning of your presentation, it was a little bit hard for us to hear here. But could you go back to when you were talking about Rhode Island not meeting a requirement in an existing statute? Could you just touch on that for another minute?
Sure,
for
absolutely.
Those of us sitting
Thank you
here
so
in the
much.
chamber.
And I don't, yeah, so that's a law. It's a minority business enterprise. Minority business enterprise had been on the books since 1986. And I remember that vividly because that was the same year that I arrived as a teenage girl from Jamaica. And I got lots of gray hairs now, no longer a teenage girl. But I can tell you that that law has never been complied with all these years, almost 35 years later, right? So, that's a law that I know that Governor Chafee did executive order around. Governor Raimondo did executive order around the increase or hoping to increase participation as it relates to minority. For example, you all probably recall recently in the middle of COVID, the state actually did that makeshift hospital where $34 million were actually spent to put that hospital together. And you want to hear the big number? 0 participation from any minorities. $34 million spent to build that hospital for COVID-19. $0 were allocated out of that money for anything to go to small business, right? So what we're asking is for that bill to really have some teeth in it. And what do I mean by that? There needs to be some sanction. For example, in the current legislation today, the law, it states that there could be sanction, and sanction could be in the form of penalties such as a company that does not participate is not allowed to come back and participate, or there needs to be participation. For example, what we're seeing, companies, the larger firms, are going around the process by identifying a minority business owner up front to get the contract, and when they actually receive that contract from the state, they actually do not hire the minority. So what we're asking for is, when I say teeth, I'm talking about accountability, transparency. So for example, if a minority company is named up front with the award when the award is made, there needs to be payment tracking system that tracks to determine whether that contractor, that subcontractor, is actually working on that job with that prime contractor. Currently, there is no way to systematically track that, and that needs to change. I know that I had spoken with the director of administration at the time. It was Michael, then it was Brett Smiley. So we have two came and went, and still nothing around ensuring that we have accountability, transparency, and enforcement. It is currently with the Department of Administration. We have gave them probably about 10 or 12 different recommendations. One, around implementing a payment system for tracking purposes that would be able to provide information readily available to see if an award was made and a subcontractor was named, a minority person or a minority company, and then follow that through to determine if that company actually participated. That would be a huge win for us as a state.
Thank you. I appreciate
You're
you
welcome.
going back over that.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to, maybe in the next legislative session, look into that deeper with you. I'd appreciate that opportunity. Thanks.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Rep., and thank you, Lisa. So I do think there's a bill in with Representative Williams regarding the minority contracts, trying to increase the percentage. I believe it's to 25%. So I don't know where that stands right now, but I know we did hear that. But so you're saying, what you're saying is that they identify the minority subcontractors, they get the contract, and then they don't actually hire them. Is that
Correct.
Wow. That's really disappointing, and that should, I agree with you 100% that there should be penalties involved and tracking. So
Correct.
the other thing I wanted to ask you is, one of the other recommendations you had is invest in minority business support agencies and organizations, I believe like your own. Are you talking about your own organization? Could you expand on that? What do we need to do to help you and other organizations to facilitate people of brown and black people to get be more successful in business and have more access to funds and the
Yeah, so
ability to
great.
open? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Great question, Chairwoman. So, I'll give you an example. So in the presentation that I did, there's actually a line item that actually created for Urban Ventures. So that's an organization, similar organization to ours. So, I'm here speaking on behalf of Black and brown businesses. Again, our organization focuses on Black, but also other minorities. So when we think about, scaling businesses, and when we think about the trust that is actually established already with organizations like RIBBA, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Urban Ventures, and other business association out there, I can tell you that if we were at scale, we as an organization, RIBBA, Hispanic Chamber, Urban Venture, if we were getting a robust investment on an annual basis, we would be able to do more with small businesses. For example, some of the things that we heard from Commerce RI when they talked about, these businesses are not coming to us. Why aren't they coming? We have all these great programs. I will remind us that it wasn't that long ago, Rhode Island Black Business Association actually came before a body here at the state and presented, and we actually called down on Commerce RI to implement a micro lending program. At the time, they actually had no micro lending program. Now everyone is talking about micro lending. But at the time, they came up and testified against RIBBA's bill that was sponsored by, at the time, Rep. Almeida and Senator Metz on the other side. But I can tell you that organization like RIBBA, we are the trusted organization in the state. We have a deep relationship with these businesses. And if we're able to scale, we are going to work intentionally like we've been doing with a skeleton budget. What we're asking for is a line item in the state's budget if we really want to move the dial in a meaningful way with lifting Black and brown communities up. We must invest in the development of Black and brown businesses. Black and brown businesses create real jobs. They create real jobs, they put real people to work. And when families are working and able to provide for their children and their family, what we do, we eliminate these poverty traps for somebody going to get a bag of food or going to get rent assistance. They will be able to provide for themselves. So what we want to do is to empower and assist businesses so they can actually grow, and grow meaning have the bankability, the relationship with banks to be able to get bank loans and capital. So we, the organization, needs to be at scale in order to do the work that we need to do. So I encourage this body to think about, as we think about the pandemic, as we think about the reopening of the state, the recovery of the state, it is going to be imperative. As I noted earlier, 41% of Black-owned businesses have closed their doors forever. That means jobs are out the door, families are impacted. So in order for the state to recover for all of us, not just for some of us, I noted earlier around the K-shape, meaning some will recover and do better. And that's what we have seen historically, right? Black and brown families continue to be at the bottom while other communities thrive, right? So if we're going to take what we saw with the unjust killing of George Floyd, right, last year, as well as what the pandemic has shown us, Black folks have been fighting two different pandemics, racism historically, right? And now the second pandemic is COVID-19. So it is going to take bold leadership, and I challenge all of us in the state to step up and to do more to invest in an organization like RIBBA and other business organizations out there that are on the ground, really working intentionally to drive changes. We've been doing this work for 10 years and counting, and we've been undercapitalized all of these years. Last year, we have some organization and funders stepped up to give us some what I call guilty donations, right? Where have you been over the last 9 years, right? So I challenge all of us to think about equity, think about inclusion and diversity, but more importantly, think about the scalability and the investment within Black and brown businesses so they can create jobs, put real people to work, and scale the economy. It's a win-win for all of us.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Do you have a number in mind that you think needs to be invested in organizations like yourself and the others that you mentioned?
So the number that we had put out there, and I've shared it with several people again, I think our annual budget, again, having, $500,000 annual budget would be a meaningful start. Again, I know that what they have allocated, I saw in the last budget was $140,000 for urban ventures. I think if that is allocated for one organization, it should be allocated to the Hispanic Chamber, Rhode Island Black Business Association. So the starting point that I saw in the last budget that I think you all call the skinny budget, I think it was either 140 or 150. I think it shouldn't just be given to one organization. I think it should be identified and given to organizations like RIBBA, the Hispanic Chamber that are doing this incredible work with underserved businesses to start. And then as we think about scalability, what does that look like? So for the following year, is that a 200,000? Is it a 250 annually? But some dollars need to be allocated to really invest in these organizations that are on the ground, doing intentional work and connecting with businesses. Again, businesses are the backbone of our economy. We must invest in all of them, not just some businesses here in the state.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you. So, and I'm sure many of the members do as well. Any other questions from any of the members of the committee? Anybody out there on TV land?
Madam Chair, it's Grace Diaz.
Yes, Grace, please proceed.
Thank you so much. I personally congratulate Lisa Rangel. I know her ethic work and the outcomes that she produced. But one thing I wanted to keep in mind that when we mention Black and brown business, we include in those who English is not the first language. So for that, just for that particular aspect, we have some business that have specific needs and difficulty to have access to the same resources she mentioned. Another thing is I want to go and be a great advocate for urban venture because it's in my district and I'm very territorial. They are providing a serious, great job despite black, brown, English, no English person, anyone who approached to them, they receive the same equal opportunity of access to services, resources, and other things. So instead, moving funding from there, I suggest that we increase the amount of money that Lisa mentioned to be more inclusive and branching to RIBBA and the chambers of commerce and others who can provide access to any part of the state where we have a black and brown Latino language speakers, business owner who are in the desperate situation that they need all kind of assistance and all kind of support. So that's just my talking point. And also I want to remind everybody that I'm the director of Minority and Women Business, which also have a specific needs, and Lisa is very aware of that. So I'm very pleased to working with you, Lisa.
Thank you, Rob.
And also there are many good legislation like Girardo introduced a great legislation at the state level. Jay Edwards also to increase the level of access to procurement and so many others that I'm following in order to help a small business in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rep. I do appreciate your leadership and thank you for your remarks. Let me just reiterate. We work in partnership with Urban Ventures, the Hispanic Chamber, so I am here advocating for all of us. All of us work collectively together. We are a support team, and I think that line item that they got, I hope it's in the budget. That's awesome. I'm glad that it's there. What I'm encouraging us to think about is how do we invest in all of us, not just some of us, right? So I would never advocate for that funding to be removed from them, but rather to ensure that we have a starting point where we allocate funding for these organizations that are on the ground today that has a vested interest, but also has relationship with our businesses that we're talking about scaling and impacting. So, if we allocated 150 for them in an initial starting point, we should do the same for RIBBA. We should do the same for Hispanic Chamber and other organizations out there. But it has to be an equal level playing field. It just can't be these one-off gifts, right? We got to ensure that we're investing broadly in order to really move the dial in a meaningful way. We're talking about real people. We're talking about creating jobs, reducing unemployment, wealth creation, and really moving the dial in a favorable way. So again, I see this as a huge win for Rhode Island. Let me just share one thing. Our Vice President, Kamala Harris, was here last week, and I had the pleasure of meeting her. What I was really saddened about, there was not one business where she visited that was owned by a Black person. Kamala Harris, a half Jamaican woman, Black woman, was here in the state in the capacity of Vice President for these United States of America. And we were unable to identify a Black-owned establishment where she could have visited, right? We got to fix that. We have 3,364 Black-owned businesses here in the state. They should have been at scale. So, well, there are some that are at scale, 295. We got to do better. We got to improve that. So when she visits the next time around, we can have Black and Latino and Asian and all of these visits where she's going across the state, visiting all kinds of businesses, not just selected few.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I think you have very good points, and I think you have a great advocate in Rep. Diaz, who's also on the Finance Committee, so we got that message loud and clear what you need. So thank you for your presentation.
Chairwoman, can I just say something?
Certainly, Rep. Ranglin-Vassell.
So I just wanted to say, first of all, how incredibly proud I am of the work that my sister is doing in the state of Rhode Island and the work that she puts in every single day to ensure equity and to really dismantle systemic poverty. And I want to just add my voice and to say, if we are really serious in the State House about really moving children and families out of poverty, it is important that our words, the rhetoric, and the actions that we take align. There has to be intentional. It's not like we're just saying this because it sounds really, really sexy. We have to make sure that we work. And the work that the Black Business Association is doing and so many other organizations is to say we have to invest in people. It's not enough to say COVID has shown us what Black and brown people and Black and brown business know for so many years in Rhode Island. We have to ensure that we invest robustly. And I hope that the data that my sister, that Lisa presented today, and I hope that this PowerPoint can be shared and not just shared as something that we came on and we listened to, but to really look at the data and to use that data to drive what we do moving forward. So I thank you, Elise, for your work, because I know how hard you work. I also know how passionate you are about this work and how passionate about how you feel in moving not just some communities, but all of us, what I call the beloved community, where every single person can thrive. And so I didn't want to just, I did not want to not share what I just said. Thank you, because this work is exhausting, it is frustrating, but you show up and you do a really amazing job. So thank you so much for presenting this evening.
Thank you, Representative Ranglin-Vassell. And I agree with you. Her presentation was very enlightening and powerful, and I appreciate all the work she does as well. And I think we need to help her move forward with her cause. And that's why I'm really glad she came on today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a really pleasure to be here again. You know, I don't do this work by myself, right? We do have a board of director, we have members, we have staff. So this work, again, I see Cynthia Scott, who's, you know, I'm actually stepping down, I stepped down from the presidency into the ED role, and Cynthia is stepping up. Cynthia Scott is on the line. But I don't do this work by myself. I do this work as a village of people. There's lots of us. We have staff and we have consultants and we have partners in board of directors. So this is a work that is led by me as the founding president, but certainly it's a team of effort. It's a team of people, right, that are working together to drive this in conjunction with our partners out there in the field. I mentioned Urban Ventures and the Hispanic Chambers and others. We're going to win together, and it has to require all of us to roll up our sleeves and to ensure that we are thriving together and that we're not leaving anyone behind. It's not a one-person show. It's us working collectively to drive changes, needed changes. So, and to you, all of you on this committee, Chairwoman, and to all of you members, I am very grateful that you gave us the opportunity today to present. And I'm happy to work with anyone who would like to get more details around some of the legislation that I shared, or anything that you believe can be derived from the conversation. We have a lot of work to do, but I think we can do it. We're small enough that we can really do a lot of impactful work. So I thank you all so very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Yes, thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for putting up with our technical difficulties. I apologize to you and the committee for whatever went wrong here.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. And next on our presentation, we have a discussion from Newport businesses. Erin Donovan Boyle, who is the Executive Director of the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce. Erin, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this afternoon.
There you are. Great. Proceed,
Can you hear me
please.
okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work seamlessly. Okay, can you see my
Yes, we
screen?
can.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ms. Erin Donovan Boyle, the Executive Director of the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce. Here today just to give you a little bit both on our organization, but even more state of the economy in the Greater Newport region. We define the Greater Newport region to include all of the coastal, so really in the East Bay. So the majority of our membership comes from Newport County. We also have Bristol County, but we also work on development effort that includes both of those two counties that right now. So we have 4 pillars of our organization. The chamber is actually 100 years old. In 2000, we had the misfortune of celebrating our centennial year, where we had grand plans for celebrating year anniversary, but unfortunately 2020 was not what we all had hoped, and very specific challenges. Our 4 pillars of the organization, the main focus of programs, services, events, programs that we offer to our members. We have 34 board members that represent the entire region, but also different types of businesses, from sole props up to large defense-related industries.
Erin, could you just speak closer into the mic? So, because you're breaking up in and out here.
Okay.
If you don't mind. If there's anything you could do on your side, because it's not, I'm told it's not coming from our side.
Okay, can you hear me more now?
Yes, it's just that as you move back and forth, I think you break up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we have over 65 events per year. A lot of that is focused on typical, events and programs that most chambers of commerce offer. So networking events, professional development, business training, seminars, HR professionals. We have a really robust women in business series and programming that we offer. And then, of course, for our emerging leaders, which are our young professionals. We have quarterly events where we host larger scaled, typically in-person events, but also virtual now, economic updates, as well as public policy discussions. So we are also the local trusted voice of everything related to business issues. So pushing out information, again, about public policy, things that might be taking place at the General Assembly, but then also just trends and different opportunities that we see coming down the pipeline that we think is important for people to be aware of. Similar to Lisa's messaging, we are one of the organizations already on the ground that is a trusted voice for up to 1,000 businesses, where they turn to us for a lot of this information, a lot of these different types of opportunities. So we actually, I think you'll see a lot of the same theme in some of our discussion today as what you heard earlier. We, of course, advocate as well. So pushing out that information, like I just said, is something that we do to our broader business community. We also adopt a public policy platform each year, which outlines the areas of focus for the year. So things that we support, things that we want to advocate for to move forward, or any concerns that we see or anticipate coming down the pipeline. We have regular municipal liaison meetings with council people from each of the different communities. And then we also have a government affairs committee where we meet with our different representatives and senators, Rep. Cortvriend being one of them fairly recently. But on an annual basis, we try to reach out to all of our General Assembly members, as well as our municipal council members as well, so that we really are working on issues both at the municipal and statewide level. The next pillar of our organization is Innovate. I'm sure you all are familiar with Innovate Newport, which is a partnership between the City of Newport and the Chamber of Commerce, where we were able to build a capital stack to renovate and rehab a 100-year-old building that was formerly an elementary school. We were able to raise federal, state, and local dollars to actually do that renovation, and we converted the school into an innovation hub where we have some permanent tenants, but then also have event and meeting space for the local business community, as well as co-working opportunities, which is really a place for where we see a lot of growth potential, but then also an important component to the broader ecosystem, particularly as we see a lot of migration from some of the urban areas into our region and a significant move to remote work. So we anticipate that component growing and being in more need moving forward. And then the fourth pillar, which is really where I'm going to focus the crux of the conversation today, is on our Connect pillar, which is our Regional Economic Development Division. This entity is actually funded separately from the Chamber. It's actually funded in our C3, which is Newport County Development Council, and it's a public-private partnership. The conversation started around 2015 around the concept that the coastal communities and the municipalities in Newport and Bristol counties really needed to start to work together to move forward with economic development initiatives. While the state is heavily concentrated in its department in Commerce Corporation of Rhode Island, we recognize that our region has significant differences from just, the capital and some other areas throughout Rhode Island, but also that our municipalities were quite small and their capacity to be able to handle economic development solely without working together with the other municipalities was not beneficial to the region. So the municipal leaders actually started this conversation with my predecessor at the Chamber and moved the ball forward. In 2018, we actually were able to launch. In 2018, we were able to launch this Regional Economic Development Division. And again, it included the municipal leaders, all from Newport County, and Bristol and Warren were part of the initial conversations. And we were able to receive funding from the Van Buren Foundation to seed the development of this organization, and also contributions from some of the larger institutions on the island to truly make this a public-private partnership. So in 2019, we began the process of implementation. So we launched a business retention and expansion program through the hiring of a business outreach specialist. And that individual started to do some surveying of local businesses in the area. And we also pulled together a large business walk, which was a region-wide effort where we had municipal and business leaders working together in teams and deploy to 100 businesses throughout the region. And in those meetings, we were able to pull some significant survey data and start to implement our efforts going forward. We also partnered with the Fourth Economy, which is a national economic development firm that helped us to start to implement not only this entity, but also we were pulling together a long-term economic development strategy for the region. In 2020, we began that process based on the data that we had collected from all of the local businesses and through best practices around the country for how to implement some of these things. Unfortunately, as that work began, COVID hit in March of 2020, and we had to switch gears pretty quickly. We were well positioned to do so because we had this infrastructure, at least it's place. And what we were able to do was switch gears pretty quickly. We pulled together our partners in the region from the major industry sectors that make up our economy, which included SNEDIA, the Southeast New England Defense Industry Alliance, the Rhode Island Marine Trades Association, Discover Newport, which is our CBB, Rhode Island Hospitality Association, and Polaris MEP. So our 6 organizations came together and we formed a Restore Greater Newport Task Force. The goal of the task force was to pull in, again, all of those major industry sectors, some that were obviously heavily impacted by COVID, some of the restrictions, the shutdown and so forth, and then others that weren't as impacted, but recognize the synergy of the local economy, the regional economy, and how important every piece of it is to make sure that engines are firing. So by that, I mean hospitality and tourism make up a significant component of our quality of life and quality of place within the region. And without that, recruitment, retention of talent is actually that much more difficult. So even in the defense industry, the marine trades industry, that were not as heavily impacted by the pandemic or impacted in different ways, their success also hinged on the importance of building back the hospitality and tourism industry and that quality of life. And so now that we're in 2021, we are moving forward with some of the strategies that we put in place. And again, we were able to pull together some short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We're working on the long-term strategies now. The investors, again, of Connect Greater Newport, I already indicated who those individual organizations are, mainly the communities, the private sector, and philanthropical endeavors. So what some of that work started to do was enable us to lead and the opportunity for the region. And these are some important points. We have a lot of data that I'm happy to share with you all in future conversations or privately. But these are some of the main points that I wanted to just touch on. First, combining the best of our communities at a scale that can support a regional economy was recognized by the partners in this entity, but then even more so important as we move forward to recover and develop a resilient strategy out of the pandemic downturn. So since 2008, the 2008 recession, we saw that job growth had been low, but it was fairly consistent until, of course, you see in 2020. So we had 68,900 workers in 2002. It ebbed and flowed with the, and the green is the Greater Newport region versus the blue, which is the Rhode Island region, with how the economy was faring. And then in 2020, we saw a reduction to 63,100. So over 5,000 employers. We're trying to make sure that we implement strategies that help us recover faster than we did in the 2008 recession. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So the unemployment rate, we all know where it stands for the state. We're at about 7.2% at the end of March. In Greater Newport region, however, we're at 6.5%. So it looks like we're faring a little bit better. However, the biggest concern here is actually the number up on top. The 2,486 people have actually left the labor force in Newport and Bristol County in the past year. We all know about the conversation around labor force issues right now, getting people back to work, and there are multiple reasons why I think we can all assume that is the case. But one of the bigger concerns is that 2,486 people have actually left the labor market. That means they're not collecting on unemployment. They have either retired, moved out of the area, chosen not to return to their profession and potentially get retrained or enter education, or some other reasons that we can't, the last reason would be that they have childcare issues or have a dual income family and have determined they'll remain with one income. So that's a big concern, especially because we know that there are over 1,000 jobs available in the hospitality and tourism industry on Aquidneck Island today. But we're essentially down 6,800 potential people in that workforce. However, there are some opportunities. I alluded to this earlier. Remote work ability in our region is pretty significant for the whole state of Rhode Island, not just Greater Newport. Certainly quality of life and quality of place attract people to our region and other parts of the state as well. In Greater Newport, we have approximately 18,845 workers able to work remotely based on their job and what the type of occupation they have, and we're also part of that broader northeastern corridor where industries and jobs conditions allow for high concentrations of working remote. We also know that we benefit from the blue economy, which is the world's largest growing industry sector. But in Newport, it represents about 10% of our specific positions that we have and occupations we have available. And that encompasses a lot of the industry sectors that I already highlighted. It's not just blue tech, and it's not just undersea technologies. It is everything related to water, including boating and recreation, hospitality and tourism, and so forth. So that presents a pretty good opportunity for our region to specifically focus on growth areas there. So when we were beginning to do the 10-year economic development strategy and had to switch gears, we've now switched to an economic resiliency strategy, which is really what I'll talk about today. The Restore Greater Newport task force that we pulled together, we have our own website, restoregreaternewport.com, where you can go. We've actually been tracking in real time the data points that we think are really important for the impact of the pandemic on the local economy. So we have things like meals and room taxes, traffic on the Pell Bridge, and then unemployment and some other factors as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that website. We're doing it on a monthly update, that dashboard on a monthly basis. And it also allows for real-time information relative to recovery programs. So programs that Commerce is pushing out, the feds, whatever it may be. So we're trying to create that local resource. And we did that with the partners that I talked about, the 6 organizations, then also have been pulling together a large group of multiple types of business leaders on a regular basis to talk about some specific projects of how we can make that short-term impact. One of the areas that we were successful was with the Shop Greater Newport webpage that we were able to set up through a technical assistance grant from Commerce. We were able to set up an e-commerce site for our local businesses. We launched it in November. There's about 150 businesses that are on there, and this was our alternative and proposed solution to help those businesses who are mom and pops or Main Street businesses that typically with foot traffic are able to entice people through curb appeal and window shopping, getting their customer base, which obviously was significantly reduced throughout this pandemic. Additionally, it's an opportunity going forward because we know that consumer habits have changed, and the most vulnerable businesses are those that are on Main Street in the retail and restaurant arena. So we were able to do that. We were also able to act as an intermediary, similar to Lisa's presentation. I think Commerce, when all of the federal dollars came in, Commerce Corporation leaned on intermediary organizations like ours, like RIBBA, and many others around the state to help them push out the information and counsel and provide technical assistance to the businesses so that they could access the funds and really expedite getting the money into the hands of those hardest hit businesses as soon as possible. So, I was very happy with being able to partner with Commerce on these multiple different types of programs and ensure that our region fared well and accessed those funds. But certainly it has identified the need for regularity of that type of relationship for intermediary organizations because we, again, are that trusted voice and we know our members very well. We know what they need and what they don't need. So being able to lean on us has definitely never been more important. So just looking forward, we are cautiously optimistic. People are looking to travel. It's obviously an important component of our regional tourism going into our season in the area. We're nervous for a couple of reasons, labor force being one of them. But now that there is more predictability, there are more people who are vaccinated, both outside of Rhode Island and inside of Rhode Island. We're seeing confidence and consumer confidence and interest in traveling going up pretty significantly. Our bookings are starting to increase. The wedding attendance and opportunities because of the predictability now is starting to grow, and that is obviously a really important component to our regional economy and also for funding for our municipalities in the area as well. Conference market is starting to pick up in the third and fourth quarter, although what that looks like in the long term and how habits have changed is a question. That's definitely still something that I think the verdict is out. How many of those larger scale, or in our case, mid-size scale conferences will come back, because I do think that some efficiencies and cost savings have been realized with going to virtual events. The labor force issue is going to limit capacity in all of this, though, and that is obviously of concern right now. Federal interventions that have been underway, I have to say I've been extremely impressed. I have some history with working with the federal government. I've never seen them act so quickly and be able to be so responsive. So it's been very significant. I apologize, my daughter is home. Okay, I'm on a call. Go see John. No. So other opportunities that we know that we need to focus on are economic development, childcare, and then broadband and housing. I apologize.
Especially childcare, right? No problem. Real life gets in the way sometimes.
So childcare for obvious reasons, but then also broadband was identified through our surveying and data gathering process that has been underway. It's been significantly enhanced since COVID hit as well, because of a heavier reliance on obviously education, virtual education from home, telehealth, but even more people moving to remote work and not leaving or not returning back to the workplace, and potentially those hybrid models being put into place for the long term. Workforce housing has been another area that we recognize throughout the state, but certainly in our region the cost of housing has continued to increase, particularly because we've seen a migration of individuals move from urban centers into our region who are buying into a lower valued versus a Boston or New York, and able to pay higher costs for the housing. So it's really having an adverse impact on workforce housing and the availability to find homes and to find rental properties as well for seasonal employment. So we need local capacity to access these resources and develop the programs and services specifically related to our communities. And that's one piece that I think we all sort of recognize, since COVID has gone into effect. Businesses are continuing to look to us to identify and solve these issues, as I'm sure you're hearing from your constituents to do the same. How can we help entrepreneurs in our region regain the confidence so those workers who maybe have been displaced from the hospitality and tourism industry, who are looking to start their own businesses and organizations, how do we help them do it? How do we help those businesses who realized during COVID that they were more vulnerable because maybe they didn't have access to a line of credit, or they don't have, they're not banked well, and they don't have relationships with financing institutions? We have begun the process of looking for additional resources from the Economic Development Administration as well to ensure that we can get the workforce development efforts underway, implement the programs that we need to help those entrepreneurs, or professional development and training resources as well. And then, of course, talent retention and attraction for skilled labor. And this is really something, obviously we're seeing a shortage, particularly for our season that we're going into, which is very concerning because we can't afford to lose another season. But then the concerns, the long-term concerns across the board for every level of position is really what we're looking into. The defense industry is hiring right now, and they haven't had a hard time hiring. So how are we going to ensure that that remains the case, that they can get the high skills that they need in their labor workforce? But then also, when they are able to attract that higher skilled worker, whether it's from the region or not, how is their trailing spouse or family going to fare when they relocate into the community? Are there job opportunities for them? Is the education and training available for their families and their children, and so forth? Broadband issues I already mentioned. One thing that we have been able to leverage since we've been doing a lot of this work is we've identified funding from the Van Buren Foundation to help us do GIS mapping of the region to identify specifically where enhancements might need to be made, or where connectivity falls short. So we can then identify what solutions are, but also the feasibility of the types of solutions that should be done, so that when federal stimulus dollars do become available in 5 or 6 months to help support broadband implementation, we have some shovel-ready projects to move forward. So that work is currently underway. An RFP has already gone out. We'll be working with a technology firm to do the mapping for us, create the feasibility cost analysis of some potential solutions. And next week, I believe, we're scheduled to award that contract. So I'm looking forward to that, because it's, across the board an issue. And then the workforce housing strain. And I know that this speaker has put forth a pretty robust, group of legislation to try to help address that and low to moderate income housing. So very much looking forward to see how those things roll out. But in the meantime, convening our municipal leaders to get ideas from them of how to tackle the issue. And again, doing this from a regional perspective, we believe is going to help at least have open dialogue, so that individual businesses can, or municipalities can plan together for where it makes sense to have low density, where it doesn't, and just really be responsive to the whole economic need for the region. So we've recently submitted some requests for your consideration, for hopefully for the House and the Senate to mull over. But these are some of the suggestions that we have. A dedicated budgetary line item be created to support regional economic development partnerships, similar to what Lisa spoke of earlier. Really supporting those intermediary organizations in times or regularly, so that the capacity is built throughout the region. Again, we were successful in becoming partners with Commerce through the federal CARES Act dollars that became available. We were leaned on as an intermediary organization, and we're very appreciative of that. It would, I think, benefit all parties if long-term relationships and capacity were established because of the need of the top-down and the grassroots from the ground up coming together to reach as many people as possible. But also because, when we are needed the most is when our own capacity and our own organizations, future is in jeopardy as well. So we are funded primarily through event revenue, sponsorship dollars, and member dues. And our members were the ones who couldn't pay their bills, but that's when they needed us the most. And so we needed to make sure that we were able to bridge that until times got back to normal. We were able to continue with our revenue model. But that is my biggest fear, that if another incident like this, another longer term type of economic downturn were to happen and our organization weren't able to sustain the level of activity and supports that are needed for the small business community, that the small businesses won't get it. Additional areas that we're looking for support are additional dollars to help support tourism promotion. We obviously are heavily reliant on that, particularly in the season, and the dollars that are generated to do that promotion are generated from activity. We had very limited activity last year. The dollars raised in one year are used to promote the following year. We've seen a significant reduction in those dollars. Discover Newport has significantly downsized, yet they are the ones who have been promoting the area and putting Newport on the international map, which ultimately helps the state and so forth for the long term. So we certainly want to see continued support there. I would add dollars marketing our region and our state to attract talent. It has never been more important. We've got an aging workforce. We know that we have a larger discrepancy between lower wages and good wages, and we need a robust, holistic economy and entry opportunities for all different stages of skilled employees. But right now, I fear that we're losing. Knowing that we already lost 2,400 people out of the regional workforce is really significant. So I don't know how we get that back if we don't start to import people as well. Support to create a regional
Erin, can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
Unfortunately, we have another committee that's coming into this room in about five minutes, maybe 10, depending on when they get here. But if you have I know you have several more slides, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can put forward the most important issues that you want to put forward, and at least allow the committee a chance to ask questions.
Just these last two items, and then I can wrap up and get questions. So it's really the support to create a regional economic development district in our region. Again, we are approaching the economy holistically and with our partners in the area, but similar to other states where they have different regions that are focused on economic development and they have a designation that enables those different regions to go after federal dollars through the EDA as well as create their own revolving loan funds. But unfortunately in Rhode Island, there's only one EDD that's recognized, and it is the Commerce Corporation of Rhode Island, which certainly should be, but it would be interesting if it would enable us to get more federal funding into the state if we were able to pursue our own. And then the last piece is the EDA revolving loan funds. The state does have one. It's run by Commerce. Unfortunately, over the course of the last 7 years, we can only find one business that had received a loan through this program in our region. And, our request would be to either carve off a certain amount so that we could dedicate it to our local businesses or enable us to seek funding for our own. And unfortunately, again, we can't right now. So that's really the crux of my proposal. Those are our specific asks. Here's our information, contact information from Connect Greater Newport. But I would be happy to see questions.
Thank you very much, Erin, for your presentation. Do I have any questions of this presenter from any of the members of the committee? Representative Fenton-Fung.
Yes, thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate everything, even though I'm here representing Cranston right now. I was born in Newport Hospital and grew up in Middletown, so talking about the area here, I cannot, and I'm going to use this opportunity to have a shout out for something you highlighted so well. The broadband on the island is atrocious. It's not just in Newport, it's island-wide. We still own property down there off Thames Street. You get one bar if it's good, on a good day. I think this really hurts us when we're talking about remote work and remote work opportunities. Obviously, there's a huge influx of people from New York right now and Boston and whatnot. And you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier as well, saying, well, here are some opportunities for us in the next few years. But unless they're able to connect to the internet, I mean, it is atrocious on the island. And we only have one provider, where other parts of the state have additional ones. So if that, I mean, literally, if that is the one thing that that's successful in the next year or two, that would be a huge boon for the businesses and for the residents of the island. So I'd be happy to help you with any of those initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And yeah, obviously that is a big problem. I was unaware of it, but I believe Rep. Ruggiero has legislation that she has put in. So, and
Yes, she has. We have testified in support of that, and she has been a great resource and supporter of this effort as well.
yes, yes, great. And, you know, we know how important Newport is, especially to our tourism economy, and we certainly need all the dollars and cents that brings in, and jobs, and fun, and everything. So I appreciate all that you're doing out there. I don't see any other hands, but, you know, we'll post, if you could send me an email, or the committee, an email about your PowerPoint, we'd like to post it on our small business documents, and that way others can see it and it gets more attention. So thank you very much for taking the time, Erin, and I again apologize for the technical difficulty that we had at the beginning, and I appreciate your time and patience and your very insightful PowerPoint. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present. And please know that we're a resource for you as well as you move forward with different legislation, different opportunities, ideas. We would be happy to be part of that conversation and share any data and information that could be useful for you.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, that concludes the House Committee on Small Business. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we'll see you all soon. Have a safe week and get vaccinated.